Hey guys, so I'm going to show you real quick how to create a new test on Horizon. So the first thing you're going to do is click on, well, of course you need to get here by going to 24/7, click on eCart, then click on Horizon, then click on Continue. And then you're going to want to go to Test Bank. By the way, this is how you can always navigate, you know where you are. You can go back to home, but this gives you your breadcrumbs, so I went from home to Test Bank. But you'll see this grow as you go to different places, so you know exactly where you're at. Um, so I'm going to click on Create New Test, and the test settings are going to pop up. And the very first thing that you want to do when you create a new test is you are going to want to name it. Okay, so I named the test, and then always click Save. I mean, I guess you don't have to click it right now, but you do want to get in the habit of clicking on Save, because if you don't, you'll end up losing something. All right, so I'm going to look at my settings. All right, I've got my name. Right now, the scope of the test is just private. I'm going to leave that alone for now. And I have it set as online. Let's go ahead and set that for both. If you set it for both, then that gives you a lot more options for the test. You and anybody else who might want to use it. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the open date and the close date. The open date is going to, by default, be the day that you're creating it, and the same with the close date. You really want to be careful with this, because if you make the close date too soon, and you don't, and say you want to use the test again next year, you won't be able to use it if it's closed. So what I always do is I go in here and I just go crazy and I go like all the way up to like 2014 or 15 or something, just so that I know that I'll be able to use the test later. You can always close the window, make it less when you make a test, but you cannot make it more. Now, if you keep it private, you do still have the option to change the window, but most of the time we're making these public so that we can share them with our teammates. So just get in the habit of making that close date way out into the future. This is just for if you want it to have a password for students to take the test. Probably not anything that we need to do in elementary. Okay. The display, I always set it at one question at a time. The reason I do that is because if they do end up taking it online, it's much better for them to view it as one question at a time. Time limit, this is all, these things are kind of up to you and your team. Time limit, max attempts. Some people, sometimes you might agree with your team that you want to give them at least 2 attempts. Sometimes you want to agree that they only get 1. That's up to you. It depends on what kind of test it is. If you do give them more than 1 attempt, you might want to click on this, that it would clear the responses. That way, when they go back to take the test again, they won't see the responses that they did before. Default point value, I always just leave at 1. But again, that's up to you. If you feel like that that this test should be worth more or whatever, that's up to you and your team to talk about. I always allow backtracking. Shuffling questions, I would only do that if you were sure that you were only going to take it on the computer. If you decided to have them take it paper pencil and then enter into the computer, that can cause a problem. But shuffling is good. If you've got computers next to each other and you don't want people looking at each other's tests, shuffling can be a good thing. Then they can't actually cheat on each other. Show feedback. I always click on show feedback. That doesn't mean they're going to see how they're doing as they're taking the test. That means that if you actually provided any feedback within the questions, they would see that feedback. And you'll see that. I'll show you that later. The tools section, you want to have show strikeout. And I would go ahead and click on apply to all sections, even if you only have 1 section right now. You may end up with more than 1 section, so apply to all sections. Calculator, again, this is up to you and your team. It depends, if you're doing a math test, you have to decide if you're going to let them have a calculator on an online version of the test. This is important, results options. You're going to want to, I always click on display all, because for me, the purpose of a test or an assessment is for them to see how they did and see what they needed to improve on. And I feel like after they take the test and later on when they're going back to look at their results, they should be able to see all of the results. Now, there are good reasons why you might not do that. You might display score only or display score and correct or incorrect questions only if you're worried about them. Somebody took the test, and if all of sixth grade was taking a test and one class took the test, a few days before another class, maybe you don't want them talking to each other or showing each other the results. So you do need to think about that if you feel like that might be an issue. Um, I also always click on show results when test is open because if you don't do that, you'll have to close the window for them to see the results. That's kind of a pain. So I always just do show results when test is still open. And I always do show item analysis because that's really where it shows you one question at a time what they got right or wrong. It's a very, very nice overview of the test for them and their parents to look at. This right here, this print version, I'm going to show you that pretty soon. That's where we're going to upload a print version of the test, but we can't do that until we actually create the test. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to come up here. Now you can go ahead and you can put test instructions like student instructions and teacher instructions if you want. I don't generally do that, but if you feel it's important, there's something really important you want the students to do when they're taking the test, for example, like if it's an online test and they've never taken an online test, you might want to go ahead and add in student instructions. This right here just shows you what sections you have. So right here we have a new section, and I can click on, oops, and it's telling me that I need to save. So that's a nice feature that it does at least remind you that you need to save. Okay, so if I click here, that's going to set me into the new section, and I can do section settings, and I can do section instructions. So that's what it was talking about before. Remember when it said show strikeout, and I said for all sections. So you can actually do some settings on some sections, whereas not. Like, so if you, for example, had a math test and you wanted them to have a calculator for half of the math test, but not for the other half, you would separate that test into sections and you would give them a calculator for some of it. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. And then also if you wanted to do one section of a test with a higher default point value and then another, like if you felt that it should be weighted more in a certain section, then you can do that. And this is where you title your section. Now our particular test is only going to have 2 questions, so it's not going to even have more than one section, so I don't need to do anything right here. I'm just going to go directly to questions, and I'm going to show you 2 ways to add a question. The first way I'm going to show you is if you click right here where the little plus sign is, that's add a question. Now that's going to be adding a question from the question bank. So if we go there and we select our curriculum, let's go ahead and do best practices and select a subject or a grade, teaching and learning. And I'm just going to, those are the only parameters I'm going to put right now. Make your parameters as big as you want information. So if you're not exactly sure, the indicator, maybe you're just kind of looking around at questions, you just kind of want to see what's out there, then don't set your parameters too small. All right, I'm going to go ahead and put search. And it says no questions match the criteria. Shocking. Okay, so I'm actually going to change this to away from best practices. And I thought that would be interesting, but clearly there aren't any questions there. So I'm going to just go ahead and change it to, we'll do 1 language arts question and 1 math question. So language arts, and I'm not even going to put a standard or a grade, because that way it'll give us a lot of options. So we've got lots, as you can see, lots and lots of options. You see this goes, page 10 and beyond. And right now we're in grade 11. So I'm just going to scroll around a little bit, look at what we have. And it moves pretty fast most of the time, unless your connection is really slow. And if you want to change those parameters at any time, say you just want to, you can always close and go back and change the parameters. I'm going to go ahead and do, I mean, most of us should be able to answer an English 11 question, I should hope. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at this question. This is to preview it. Wow, that looks kind of hard. That looks like a hard question for us. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm gonna look at the question and make sure you do always want to check the question, overview it a little bit, make sure it's appropriate for your students, even if it says the grade level and it's the thinking level that you want and everything. Just make sure that it seems like an appropriate question. Um, and I'm not going to choose that one because I don't think it's just not what I want. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I click on this little X, that's going to take me out, right back out, and right back to my test. So no worries. I can just click on Add a Question again. And this time I'm going to be a little bit more specific. And I'm going to choose Grade 2 Language Arts. Okay, so Grade 2. Ooh, I like using dictionaries and indices. Okay, I'm going to look at that one. Has a nice little passage here with a picture. Here's a list of names from the passage. Okay, these names were in alphabetical order. Which one would come second? Okay, so that's a nice question. So I'm going to go ahead and choose that question. I have to close out of my view, but do you see how it was still kind of highlighted so I could tell which one that was? So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And I'm going to add and close because that's the only question that I'm adding right now. So then it immediately goes right into my test. Right here, if I decide later I want to take it out, I can delete it right there. If I decide I want to move it down, I can move it down. If I had any other questions here, I could move it up. And right here I can say that I want to insert a question either above it or below it. I'm just going to simply click on Create a New Question. Okay, so create a new question. You have to set the parameters of the question, and we're going to do a math question. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Math, select the subject or grade. Let's see, we'll just stick with grade 2 again. And I'm not going to do a standard or anything like that because I just want to keep my parameters nice and big. Oh, I guess it's going to make me do that. I take that back. So, right, and oh, it's making me require that I do the thinking level. This is the Bloom's taxonomy thinking level, so I'll just say knowledge. And I will say multiple, let's see, what kind of question do I want to do? I am going to do true or false. And let's see, place value. Oh, that's right, because we're making this question. We're not looking for one. Okay. Identify the place value of each digit in a 3-digit number. Read, write, identify place value of each digit. Okay, read, write. Okay, so those are all pretty much the same. And I'd say that goes with knowledge. You can click on remember these values if you plan to create a lot of questions with the same standard benchmark and indicators. So I'm going to click on save. And so now I've got all that saved. I can go to question. And be sure to keep your question, true for, if this comes up, you just want to always say yes. That's just the Java applet, and it just wants to know if you accept using it. Okay, so you want to make sure you keep your question, lined up to those things that you chose. So I'm going to ask, what is the value of the digits? Oops. Okay, and it said a 3-digit number, so I'm going to go ahead and give it to that. And, oh wait, that's not going to work though, because we're doing a true or false question. So, I need to change the wording of my question. That's easy enough. The value of the underlined digit is 40. So you're asking if that is true or false. I'm going to underline the 4. Okay, save it. All right. And then I have to go down and I have to set whether it's true or false. Okay. So I'm saying that true is correct, and I'm going to save that. Now I'm going to preview the question. So the value of the underlined digit is 40. True. That matches all of these things. The place value of each digit, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And now I'm going to return to my test. And I've got my 2 questions in there. I can preview my test by clicking on this. That's how it would look if they were taking it, you know, online, and it would just be continue. Okay, and back, continue. I can have it show correct answers while I'm looking at it, so I can make sure that the answers are, in fact, correct. Okay, and then I can close out of that. Now the next part of this is you're going to add a paper version of the test, and that's going to be in the next tutorial. So thank you for watching.